Again, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out.
You are very welcome. And thank you so much for having me on your fantastic program.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So let's get into it. I know we're getting tired of COVID, talking about it, and the response around the world was very different everywhere. But on a personal level, how did you make it through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
Well, there were some very fantastic and very terrible things, obviously, about COVID. Personally, it was challenging in that my business involves public speaking.
Yeah.
I coach public speakers, and suddenly events weren't happening.
Yeah.
People weren't going out and speaking, so that was particularly challenging. But we also had this very exciting pivot, which was to people speaking virtually, and suddenly everyone who was very hesitant about doing virtual meetings or engaging with people internationally was suddenly, okay, I'm just going to have to suck it up and learn how to do this. So it was wonderful for a lot of my clients because they suddenly were available to speak at international conferences they might not otherwise have ever gotten a nod for. And that was exciting for them. And it was exciting for me because people who had hitherto thought, I can't possibly engage a coach while I'm living in Europe or America, who lives in Australia. And within a very short period of time, people went, oh my gosh, no, I can do this. So professionally, it was a period of a lot of change and challenges. Personally, obviously, everyone was worried. Australia went hard fast, which we were very thankful for
Yeah.
because it meant, our numbers were a lot better than they were in a lot of places in the world. So we were very fortunate, though we might not have enjoyed it at the time. And I'm lucky in that we're empty nesters. So my husband Rob and I were the only ones at home, and we greatly enjoy each other's company after 30 something years. So it was great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So let's get into exactly what you do. You've touched on it, and I see one thing on paper, but let's get to the brass tacks. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I say, think of your best idea that you have. And now you have to explain that to a whole lot of people who don't know anything about it and don't know why it's exciting. And that's what I'm going to help you do.
I love it. What a great way to explain it. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Oh my gosh. There were probably two things. First of all, I had seen on movies the American president, and I thought, well, that would be pretty cool, having no concept that that was not ever going to be on the cards for an Australian. And the other thing was I was really into ballet. So I thought, well, cool, I can be a ballerina and, in my spare time, I can run another country.
So, how did this happen? Take me back to your childhood. What were the seeds that made you want to get into something that's one of the biggest fears for most people on this planet?
Well, that's a bit complex. So my childhood was actually quite awful. So it was very abusive and neglectful. And so um, it was only in recent years, actually, that I've come to realize the really obvious straight line, possibly to others, but not to me, in that when I was a young child, I didn't have my voice heard. I
Yeah.
was trying to articulate to people that I needed help, that things were not okay, and it just wasn't working. And then I went through and I escaped that environment. I spent some time as a young teen mum. My husband and I have been together now 31 years. We have three sons. Life is fabulous. I've got three master's degrees. So all of these things people told me, when you're a teen mum, you will never finish school. You will never go to university. You will never get a degree. You'll never travel. You'll never have a great career. You'll never own your own business. And I just slowly go tick, 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 tick. Um, all of this is possible. You just
Yeah.
need cheerleaders and people who will be supportive, and then you can do anything. But going through that, and then I worked in strategic marketing. Before I quit and started my own business, I was working for a firm based out of America as the director of global marketing and market development. And then I was like, you know what? What I really, really love the most about my job is helping people who are either they think they might be good public speakers, but they're not. And, someone has to help them, or people who are terrified of it, but have brilliant ideas that aren't being heard. And
Yeah.
that was what was happening to me because I am a screaming introvert and I don't particularly love public speaking. But what I was finding is I would write down my ideas into proposals and I would give them to people and say, here you go. And then you'd find yourself in the meeting and the person who had, not as great idea, but was prepared to stand up and champion it and really go hard, that was the idea that would get up. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is really frustrating. And I could see it happening to other people as well. And I said, well, okay, I'm going to have to suck this up and learn how this works.
Yeah.
So I looked at the neuroscience of it and the neuroeconomics and the persuasion theory and behavioral psychology and said, what makes the human brain pay attention, listen to something, and then agree and act? And
Yeah.
so I used all that knowledge, put it into practice, and used myself as a guinea pig for 10 to 20 years, went, nailed it. And now I do it for clients,
Yeah.
but also through my TED work. So in my company is called Full and Frank because I am. But in my spare time, I run TEDx Brisbane. So for
Yeah.
people who are familiar with the TEDx platform, so I run it, I curate all our speakers, and I do all the speaker coaching for them. So my entire realm of all of my different work facets is about finding people with brilliant ideas and then helping them to articulate them in a compelling way that makes their target audience say yes.
I heard that JFK was terrified of talking in front of people, being a public speaker. And I've heard that about some of the best orators of all time. It's weird how that just translates into such a strong voice in front of people.
Absolutely. Experts suggest that glossophobia can affect which is glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, can
Yeah.
affect up to 75% of the population. Now, obviously, that ranges from I'm nervous, I'm a bit more nervous than I should be, right up the way to I'm completely paralyzed
Yeah.
and can't speak on stage. So, there's a big range there. But yes, the joke is, you'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, no, a lot of people, but it's really interesting because the people who I find who are a little bit hesitant about it, right through to being quite concerned, they often make the absolute best public speakers. JFK is a good example.
Uh-huh.
Also, get yourself a good speechwriter.
Right.
Um, but there are things you can do to get over it. It's like any skill. I am no good at plumbing, but I know if I wanted to learn how to plumb, I would find an expert or someone qualified to teach me, and then
Yeah.
I would practice, 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 practice until I was good at it.
Yep.
And public speaking is exactly the same.
Totally.
You're not going to be comfortable at the start. You're going to be worried. There are things we can do about that. Find somebody who knows what they're doing to teach you, and then practice, practice, practice.
So the one thing about speaking is that when you're looking out in the crowd, you'll see somebody that has either a smile or a twinkle in their eye. I'm curious, what was the first speech that you gave where you knew you had it? This is something you needed to pursue. This was a place that was kind of comfortable and home for you.
That is a really great question. I think there's probably two things. One, I was speaking, and not to get political, but I was speaking at a rally. At one point in time, I got involved in running the student guild on my campus
Yeah.
because they were going to shut down my childcare center on campus, and we had 3 kids in childcare, and I'm like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And I spoke to the administration and they said, look, there's nothing you can do unless you go in and take over the student guild. It's going to close. And I went, cool, done. And so that's what I did, which crazy things you do in your youth. But as part of that, I was giving speeches. And it's funny you referenced JFK. I have books behind here, like Great Speeches to Change the World. That's there. And I'm like, great, I have to persuade these people that this is important. This is an equity issue. And so I stood up at rallies, and at one that was there, one of the rallies I spoke had 10,000 students.
Yeah.
And I stood up there and I made this compelling case, and you saw people, and it had been really loud. And all of a sudden, that audience was incredibly quiet to listen. They
Yeah.
weren't chanting anymore. They weren't talking to each other. I felt, and you couldn't have heard a pin drop because it was out in a busy city street, but I felt like I had them and they were listening. And then people came up afterwards. And I remember stepping down. I was standing up on one of those big statues, where lions are. And
Yeah.
I stood down and I said to my husband, I said, oh my gosh, I just convinced 10,000 people of something. It's completely different to having to convince one person at a time.
Yeah.
So, okay, scale, got it.
Yeah.
The light bulb went off, and I just went, oh my gosh. And I just went, fabulous. And I suppose on the other side is when the reason I do what I do is the success of the people I coach.
Yeah.
So it's when you see them get up someone who is terrified, or somebody who has a brilliant idea but just has historically waffled or confused people or not hooked them in. And then you work with them, and then you see them stand up on that stage, whether it's a TEDx stage or a conference stage or a boardroom, wherever it is, and you see them absolutely nail it.
Yeah.
And it's them being them on their best day with their best idea. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do this forever.
Yeah. What's the best speech you've ever seen in your life?
Oh my God. That, oh, wow. That's really hard because
Yeah.
there are so many that are great, but it depends on whether it emotionally resonates with you personally or whether it gets you to do something. Um, there was wow, there was a speech, and I'm biased because I wrote it. But there was this in Queensland here, which is about the size of Texas for context. We
Yeah.
didn't have a single children's hospice 10 years ago. It
Yeah.
was an enormous gap, and it
Yeah.
was terrible. And so the people who were trying to get one up, called Hummingbird House, as the organization, engaged me and said, "Can you come in and work on our strategy? But then we also have to tell these stories in a really appropriate and respectful way of families who'd lost their children, or families who currently had children with life-limiting conditions that were set to lose their children without a hospice as an option for them." And so it was incredibly emotionally harrowing. Um, and it was, professionally, I would go and do the interviews with them and have the discussions to hear their story. And then I'd write the speeches and come back and work with them. But I would like be there and hold it together. And then I would drive around the corner afterwards, and I would sit in the car and cry and call my husband. I'm like, it's not appropriate for me to do that because this is their story and their
Yeah.
sorrow. But I just have to talk to me about for 10 minutes about anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
But one of the women I worked with, she had lost her son when he was 10 days old. And they said he would live for a few hours, and he lived for 10 days. And she, couldn't feed him, and she was in a maternity ward with other people bringing
Wow.
balloons and stuff to people, babies. It was a terrible situation. And as a mother, I was like, oh my gosh. Um, and I worked with her, and she was like, I don't think I can give a speech at the gala. And the gala was going to be the most important thing to just get this thing across the line. There were politicians, funders, philanthropists. I'm like, you can do this. And she's like, I really want to. I just don't think I can. And I worked with her, and I gave her the words and the script after I'd worked with her. And she's like, this is exactly how I would have told the story if I could have known that this is how I wanted to tell the story. And I'm like, great, but this is how far I can go. You're going to have to stand up and do it. And I got up from the table. I was there at the event, and I walked to the back of the room. I have to stand at the back of the room in the darkness so no one sees me, and I just have to soak in. And I watched her give it. And I knew all the bits where her voice was going to crack. I'm like, leave it, don't change a thing. And then I saw people crying, and I
Yeah.
saw people, grabbing, the man folk of the room gently, just, oh, this room got a little dusty. And I saw them all reaching for the cards to give donations or to find out the prospectuses. And my eldest son was with me at the time because he was my partner for the event. And he just kind of gave my arm a squeeze. And I'm like, job done,
Yeah.
job done. It was amazing. And actually, I was so moved. It was such a gracious thing when they poured the cement slab. I'm going to cry now. When they poured the cement slab to build it, because they thought it would take 10 years to get the money. We got the 13 million in like 18 months. And when the families got together for a very private slab pouring before, the fancy dancy and the politicians, and they all put like handprints, and they put some of the baby's shoes into the cement of the slab. It was very emotional. And then they said to me, you need to write your name here too, because this wouldn't have happened without you.
Wow.
And so every time I drive past that, every time I drive past that suburb and that place in my town, I go, yep, okay, that was a good day.
That's a great story. What a wonderful story. So, who's been an inspiration? Who's been that hero for you in your life?
I actually, when people ask me that, I say, look, I don't have individual heroes. I don't think it's really a great idea to look at a person as a hero. I think deeds are a great thing. So there are people that I can look at across the political divide, across a range of topics, and go, wow, you just did an amazing thing. And here's what you did. So, for me, there are people who have done, fabulous things. The people who fought and fought and fought to get that Children's Hospice. Amazing. There's somebody I work with, Dan Allen, and Ed Ross. He was one of my TEDx speakers, Dan, and they started a company here in Australia where they make the most funky lurid workwear for tradies, which is our, contractors. And 50% of all of these shirts um, go to a free mental health service that tradies and contractors can get for free, to help them. So, there's just so many. One of my other clients is a professor who, performed the world's first breast construction surgery using a 3D printed bioscaffold instead of silicon. Every day I'm working with amazing people who constantly inspire me. But the things that makes what they do, I think, heroic is that obstacles have been thrown in front of them. It's that difference about people. In my experience, there are people who see a problem and point to it and say, someone should do something about that. And then there are people who see a problem and say, I'm going to do something about that.
Yeah.
And all of those people are my heroes.
So if you could see a speech by anybody alive today that you're totally enamored with or that you think would be just wondrous to see, who would it be? Who would you love to see speak?
Um, I think being in a room and seeing Obama, former President Obama, would be amazing.
Yeah.
I've been on town halls. I've been fortunate to be in virtual town halls, and seen some of the things. And it has done its job in that I have been inspired. And I think regardless of, political, if you put politics aside, wherever you are on the spectrum, it's the ability to command, convey, inspire, and motivate. I was like, okay, I'm off this call and I'm going to go and do exactly what you said. And to me, that's powerful public speaking. It is not the after dinner toast, which, has importance in its own right. You want people to know about the bride or the groom. You want them to have a good time. You want them to enjoy it and have a few laughs. That's great. That's, the charisma realm. But then if you're talking about persuasive public speaking to inspire people to act and do something, you need to be very strategic and very tactical and make sure you're getting them to where they need to be. And yeah, I would love to see that live.
I actually took my son, I believe he was, how old would he have been? He would have been 4. And we went and saw him in downtown Kansas City. And it was during the '08 campaign, and that voice just boomed over downtown. I remember walking away from it because we left a little bit early to beat the crowd, and just to hear his mastery of oratory and just everything, it was phenomenal. It was quite stellar. So I'm curious, what is the motivator for you every day to wake up and do this work you do? You have to give a lot of yourself to help others get to a better place, a comfortable place, get rid of the anxiety, but you are a human and you have to evolve and grow. What is that collective gumption for you every day to do what you do?
The success of the people that I work with is 100% why I do what I do. When my head touches the pillow, I want to think that was a great day. I just made a difference. So, um, when I help the people I help, and I'm selective about who I work with, but I know that if they can just get this idea out into the world and do it justice, that the world is going to be a better place. So, tangentially, if I help them do that, so if I help these people, there's a children's hospice in Queensland now. I help this other person, there's more money going towards this particular piece of research. I help this person, somebody knows more about this that needed to know about a medical procedure or a new piece of technology or how to make flood-proof ferry terminals or how to make advertising more accessible. But every day it's new. One day I'll be learning about something and the next day I'll be learning about something entirely different, often from like the leader in that field. And I'm helping them to take their idea to the world in a way that it's just going to make the world a better place. So
Yeah.
every day, by helping these thought leaders, change makers, ideas, leaders in their field or aspiring leaders in their field to articulate their idea, their product, their services in a way that resonates and gets people to say yes, I lay my head on the pillow and go, I made the world a little bit better today.
Absolutely. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that younger version of you that's crying out and wanting someone to hear you. And you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led. the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I would say, hold on, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, of everything that you've done and overcome and evolved into at this point, what are you the proudest of?
My children, and breaking the cycle. So intergenerational violence and neglect is obviously an enormous problem. So when you break the cycle, that's huge. I remember because obviously that was very challenging for mental health at the time, and I remember being a young teen mom. I might have been 20 at the time. I was getting help, so I was still occasionally seeing a psychiatrist because mental health help helps. And and I remember he said to me, and it stuck with me all these years, and he could see that, Joseph, my oldest, he was a couple of years old now. He was doing really well. He was thriving. It was all very healthy. And he said to me, about breaking the cycle, he says, how does it feel knowing that you've already done the greatest thing that you will ever do in your life? And I think that's true. And I think that stuck with me. So I aspire to, try to get close to that, but I'm never going to do better than raising three wonderful, now adult sons, who are just fantastic humans out in the world, and they themselves are paying it forward and doing and making the world a better place with everything that they do.
So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Make the world a better place. Just do it. And more recently, one of the things that helped me get through those really tough early days, um, that which does not kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that sees you speak, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I'm somebody who is absolutely committed to making the world a better place and using my very unique skill set to do that.
Are you hopeful as we kind of come out of this pandemic and we go into the future with AI and everything? Are you hopeful for humanity?
I have those days. Look, I'm going to be honest. I have those days where I, look to my husband and something will be on the news and we'll do the Terminator 2 quote, we're not going to make it, are we? Humans, I mean. But no, overall, absolutely hopeful. You couldn't run a TEDx event, which, by the way, is done entirely voluntarily.
Yeah.
No one gets paid. You couldn't give up that much of time in your life and working with all of those people if you weren't hopeful that there is a great future ahead for humanity, but we all just need to know about these fantastic ideas and
Yep.
and thoughts. And if we learn about them, believe in them, and are motivated to put them into action, the future could be incredibly bright for us.
Yeah. I totally agree. So, last question on a fantastical note. We get off this call, time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go back in time and see one event in human history. Where are you going to go?
I have three masters and an undergrad, and my first undergrad was about feminist revolutionaries throughout Europe. And I always said at the time that I would go back and see women who started the French Revolution storming the Bastille over bread.
Yeah, great answer. So if anyone wants to reach out, hire you, learn more about what you're doing, see you speak, anything, where can they go? And you had mentioned that you had something on Linktree as well. If you don't mind talking about that a little bit, I'll put it in the show notes.
Fantastic. Yes, they can reach out to me either via my website, which is just fullandfrank.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Juanita Wheeler, or I have a few free guides that are available for anyone who's interested in how to get into public speaking or how to grow their business in public speaking. And so you can find them on my Linktree, along with whatever new and exciting options and offers are available whenever you happen to be listening to this wonderful podcast episode.
Wonderful. This has been so good. Thank you so much for waking up early, for being a part of the show. And what a wonderful interview and anecdotes and stories. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been an absolute delight.
Absolutely. Take care.